Hi, I'm Philip from codekabinett.com, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use VBA functions in Access queries. And there are custom VBA functions you wrote yourself and some built-in functions that come with Access already. I just finished a video about calculations in Access queries, and originally this topic now, functions in Access queries, were supposed to be included in that video, but I split it in half and do a new video here. So if you want to have some basic knowledge about calculations with simple mathematical expressions in queries, I suggest you watch the other video first. I'll put a link up here, and now I'm going to deal with queries that use functions. And you can use built-in functions that come with Access and the VBA library in your Access queries, or, and that is very powerful, you can write your own custom VBA functions and use those in Access queries. And the possibilities are almost limitless. There are some limitations though. Any function you want to use in an Access query needs to be a function that only has simple value types like numbers, date values or texts, and returns only simple value types like dates, numbers and text, because it has to be represented in a text-based way inside an Access query. You cannot use a query that is returning an object and then reference one of the object's properties in an Access query. You can only use functions with simple data types, but that is the only limitation with using functions in queries. Of course, you shouldn't use a function that takes very long time to run, because that will slow down the query. And in general, I will do another video on performance. Right now I'm going to focus on displaying data, displaying the results of calculations from functions. You cannot go too wrong there. If you use functions or expressions in general in the where condition of a query, then it might get tricky, but that is a topic for another video. Now we're going to look at functions in the column list, in the output results of VBA queries. Okay, let's get started right away. So let me show you how to create a Visual Basic query to do a calculation and then use that in an Access query. I go to the ribbon Database Tools and click on the Visual Basic, and this opens the Visual Basic for Applications editor window. Now this is the project view on the left, and the calculated query sample project, that is my actual project. The utility project is an other project that has been linked into the database. It contains the format window, and this has nothing to do with our code. We will only store code in the calculated query sample. And I just mention this because occasionally you might select the wrong project and now all these icons on top here are grayed out because this project is read-only and I cannot change anything there. So if you notice that your environment does not behave the way it's used to do, make sure you selected the right project in the Project Explorer. Now, to create a function, I first need to create a module and can use this icon here, Insert Module. There is a module and a class module, and I will just need a module. For a function that should be used inside a query, you need to use a basic module, not the class module. So I click on module And now here is the module name, it's just module 1, and it's a good idea to change that to a meaningful name. I use the prefix mod and I name that VAT calculations. And now the most important thing of the VBA editor is this big, almost empty text window. And I type in here my function. I just assume you are roughly familiar with how functions in VBA work, so I will not go into too much detail here. I will probably release more information on how to get started in VBA, but I just assume you got a bit of knowledge in VBA. So let's just get started with the function. It's a public function because it needs to be called from outside this module, and I name it calculate gross price. I'm just going to duplicate the feature, the calculation that we did in the query, because that is quite simple and you already know the basic logic. That is a function that is so simple I would not use VBA to do the calculation, but I do in this example just to show you how to do it in general. So we have one input parameter that is our net price, and this one is a currency, and we've got another one that is our VAT rate. And that one is a decimal, no, that is not the best idea, double. And the return value of this function is going to be a currency again. So here it is a bit hard to see all the parameters, so I can use the underscore to break the line, and that is still one instruction to VBA, because I used the underscore at the end of these lines to indicate to the VBA compiler, to the VBA environment, that the line continues, the instruction continues on the next line. And now the calculation is actually very, very basic. To return a value, we will use the function name and say equals, and now we can use the same calculation we used earlier. So net price plus net price divided by 100 times VAT rate. So I just hit the shortcut to save the module, and I say OK, I entered the name. Oh, and one thing that frequently causes problems: the module name you use for the module that is displayed here as well, it must not be the same as the function name, because that would create an error, like Access will tell you it can't find the function, or there's some sort of ambiguity. I do not know the exact error message, but function name and module name must not be the same. Just copy this and let's switch back to the Access environment, to our query. Or no, let's actually just quickly create a new query. Just once again add the TBL items and pull down all the columns here, and now I create a new calculation for gross price, and now I enter my function name. I switch over to the zoom window, then you will see much better what I'm doing. So this is my VBA function name, and then I use the column name net price and VAT rate to supply these two columns to my VBA function. And there's one thing you will probably, if you are in the English-speaking world, you'll probably use the comma to separate these two arguments to the function. In Germany, we, for whatever reason, we have to use the semicolon if we use German language settings on our PCs. So this is the function call. And now I run this query and you see the calculation is the same as before, and the formatting is actually correct because I explicitly said this function is going to return a currency data type. So Access knows it is supposed to format this as a currency value. That is a basic calculation in a function in an Access query. But wait, there's one thing I would like to show you, because there is a very, very common problem. I store this query as query items gross price func to distinguish it. And now I'm going to enter a new item in the table. Let's assume I'm going to sell bananas soon, but I'm not yet entirely sure how much they are going to cost. And maybe I have to consult my financial advisor to be sure which VAT rate is correct for them. So I enter them because I'm planning to sell them, but the data is not complete yet. So what happens now if I run the query? First, let's look at the query using the basic expression right in the query. So here's our new record bananas. There is no net price, there is no gross price because I did not enter anything regarding pricing yet. Not sure if it is a good idea to let that item show up here without a price, but there is no error and there is no price. So that is acceptable, I would say. Now let's run the gross price query with the function. And you see here is an error because the function cannot calculate the price because there was a null value in the net price, so it's impossible to calculate the gross price. And in the expression query, in the other query, the null value will just result in the result of the calculation being null as well. So it shows up empty. But with our VBA function, it results in an error. And that is because in our function, the net price and the VAT rate data types, they cannot be null. They need to be a number. And that is a very, very frequent problem in such type of calculations, and you will probably not want to show the error to your user. And there are two options you can use to deal with empty, with null values in your query. You can wrap another function around your columns, and there is one that you should absolutely know. It's the nz function, and that one will substitute the main value that should be used, that should be returned, with a substitute value that will be used if the main value is null. So I write it this way. That is the substitute value. I'll just assume the net price is 0 if there is nothing entered in the table. And the same is what I do for the VAT rate. And once again, I have to use the semicolon on my computer because I'm using German settings. You will use most likely the comma as a separator for the arguments to a function. Now I run this again, and you see it has been calculated. The gross price is 0 because the net price and the VAT rate is missing. That is not ideal. It is probably better than displaying error, but it's not ideal. And there's another technique that can be used as well to deal with null values, but it's a little bit more complex. So let's zoom this again. And we can use the inline if function or immediate if. That is a function built into VBA, and I deliberately use that in context of this video because it shows you how many possibilities are there with calling functions in Access queries. So I invoke the inline if function in here, and I will use another function right away. If is null, that is somewhat messy in that window. I would love to have a better window to edit these type of expressions, but unfortunately that is not included in Access yet. So the isNull function will check if the net price is null, and I want to check for null in the VAT rate as well. So if one or the other is null, I will just return an empty string. That is the first return value of that immediate if. If the first expression is true, then the second expression will be returned. But if the first one is false, then the second expression will be returned, and that is our function call to calculate gross price. And I need to add another bracket at the end to close the expression. And now I could safely remove the call to the nz function. And I do that just to show you and to make the whole expression a little bit simpler here. And now I run the query, and you see the gross price is empty. There's not 0 in there, and there's not an error in there because the calculation was not executed for this record because the net price was null, was not defined yet, and the VAT rate is not defined as well. That is a very important consideration for writing your own functions in VBA. Null values from your data tables will most likely result in errors. So you need to think about what should happen if there is a null value in your table that would be supplied to the function. Great! We're finished for today. We covered basic function usage in VBA and how to call these functions in Access queries. The part of calling functions from queries is mainly complete with that. It does not get any more complex than this. You know everything regarding the integration of the functions in queries. Of course, the function I showed you was very, very basic and simple. And if you need to write a more complex function, you probably need a good deal of VBA knowledge to do it. But the part of including that in a query is covered, I think. I will do another video on performance of using functions and expressions in queries. That should come up in, I'm not sure exactly when, but pretty soon. So if you want to see that, I suggest you subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.